Hello, and welcome back to another episode of C-Suite Unplugged. I'm your host, Adam Legg, and in this series, I talk to Alberta's top CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders about their journey to the C-suite, what keeps them up at night, their perspective as a leader in their industry, and their outlook on the future. If you find this episode interesting or insightful, let us know by heading over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a quick review and rating. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to C-Suite Unplugged. Well, one of the biggest expectations we have is that when we flick a switch, the lights will go on. A lot happens behind the scenes of that expectation, and our guest today knows a thing or two about what goes on there. He's worked in a variety of roles across the power sector, but today is the president and CEO of AltaLINK, part of the Berkshire Hathaway energy portfolio. Gary Hart is a passionate champion of Alberta and a successful executive who I had the pleasure of traveling to Ottawa with last October as part of our One Alberta, One Canada mission, where he clearly laid out the case for pragmatic and reasonable power policy in Canada. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Gary, for our listeners who don't know you yet, please introduce yourself and give us your elevator pitch about AltaLINK and the role you play there.
All right. So my role, as you mentioned, is president and CEO. I'll say a few words about AltaLINK. We're the largest electricity transmission provider in the province. We deliver about 85% of the power within the province, and we have a large service territory. It covers 226,000 square kilometers, and we have 13,000 kilometers of transmission lines and over 300 substations. So, a big footprint.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just for those, Adam, that don't know, electricity that well,
Sure.
Transmission is the backbone of the electricity system. It delivers, the electricity from the generating facilities to our large industrial customers, to our distribution customers. And we typically do this over the long distances. So that's hence why we've got so many kilometers. And the distribution companies are the ones that really take the electricity from us and put it to the individual commercial owners, farms, and residential customers. So that's how we kind of fit in.
Mm-hmm. So you've got the long geographies that you've got to cover, the kilometers and kilometers of big cables and towers.
Yeah, exactly. And we're proud, as you know, to be headquartered in Calgary. We've got offices in Edmonton, Red Deer, and Lethbridge. And as you mentioned, we want to make sure that when someone puts that light switch or flicks it on, that the electricity is there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, people love to hear the journey of a CEO. So tell us a bit about that journey of young Gary finishing high school, the world in front of him, to where you are today.
It's a great question, Adam. And we do get a chance to sit down with summer students and young engineers. I get this question all the time. So I grew up in Saskatchewan, Rosetown, Saskatchewan. I think I moved there when I was 2 and spent, all the time through high school there. Great little town, got nothing but good to say about it. And it was interesting. I was, as I think about my career, I was having a conversation after class with my grade 10 math teacher. And he was asking me what I was going to do after I graduated from high school, which I thought was an interesting question. And I said, I'm probably going to follow, my dad, who's a principal of one of the schools in town, and I was going to be a teacher. And I actually thought he'd be excited about that and think that was a good thing for me to be doing. And he said, I really think you should be an engineer. And to be honest, I didn't even know what an engineer was. I think this is a story for a bunch of us came from Saskatchewan. And anyways, ended up going to electrical engineering at the University of Saskatchewan. Loved the program, math and sciences. That's the thing I love to do. Fell in love with control systems so much that I was contemplating taking a master's degree in controls. I was chatting for my first meeting about my master's program with the dean at the time, who was head of controls. And he said, I've got a great role for you. Just got a call from one of my former students. We'd love you to think about it. I think it'd be a great role. And it was an instrumentation controls job with TransAlta. And I found myself out in the coal-fired plants. I think a lot of us know that the coal-fired plants are being shut down in the province, but I started my career there. Fantastic place to start your career. You're right in the field. This was west of Edmonton, where a lot of the 3 coal plants that I supported were. It was a great experience. When I think about it now, replacing control systems when I was in my early 20s on these big facilities was quite something to be given the task of. But anyways, I had some great people that I worked with out there. We did some really good work out there. But one day I got another tap on the shoulder from the plant manager that I was stationed at and said, "What do you think about going to China? We're looking at investing in coal plants over there."
Oh.
And so, thing I knew, I found myself on a plane over to China. We did a 3-week visit looking at coal plants. And when I came home, I had an opportunity to work for independent power, the IPP group, they call it independent power producer side of TransAlta, the non-regulated side at the time. So anyways, big shift in my career. I ended up doing business development work, started internationally with visits to Chile, more in China, Thailand, and then Alberta's electricity market deregulated. And I was asked to kind of lead the development work in Alberta and had the pleasure of developing the first 2 cogeneration facilities in the province, one with Dow and one with Suncor. Shortly after I finished that, I was asked to head to Ontario, which was considering deregulating. And I headed up our Ontario business out there, which was a really interesting opportunity as well, because it was part of what they called an income fund or a limited partnership. It was like a separately traded vehicle where we had these assets in. So anyways, I got a real opportunity to get exposed to boards, an independent board of directors, which you get these very seasoned board members on, and they ask you great questions, which I love the questions to this day that I got asked when I was heading up those operations out in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, after that, I ended up in a conversation with the general counsel over at Suncor, who I negotiated the cogen deal with, and I found myself heading to Fort McMurray to head up their utilities, take care of their utilities in Fort McMurray at their oil sands facilities. And later I got an opportunity to get involved in production planning and scheduling at oil sands. I got the feel for the oil sands business. Shortly after, I was asked to head up supply chain for Suncor, which ended up being quite the opportunity. We got into a real boom period there with, over $10 billion of supply chain services, an incredible time. Went through a merger with Petro-Canada, so an unbelievable other experience. And anyways, love that opportunity in oil and gas. End up in another conversation. It's amazing how these conversations happened with an old schoolmate who was at the time the CEO of AltaLINK. And he asked me if I'd be interested in joining Berkshire Hathaway Energy Canada, which was a non-regulated entity. And it was an opportunity to grow AltaLINK's footprint on a non-regulated basis outside of, just the transmission business. And so I started with that role. A year and a half into it, it was a great opportunity, and the CEO of AltaLINK retired. And from there, I got the opportunity to take over as CEO of AltaLINK. And I think a lot of people probably know this, but AltaLINK was a part of TransAlta, the original company I started with. So they got spun off as a separate entity when everything was deregulated in Alberta. So it was kind of like a homecoming. I find myself in this great company with a lot of people that I started my career with and moved from CEO to CEO. And here I am today. A bit of a tangled journey, but it's been a blast.
That's awesome. Lots of experiences, twists and turns, different locales, but in many ways back where you started to some degree, which is an exciting place to be. Gary, what's your leadership philosophy? What type of leader do you want to be remembered as, and any influences or mentors that guided you along the way?
And so I've obviously had some great leaders and mentors, and I can't remember which one of them got me on to, I don't know if you've heard of Patrick Lencioni, but he'd be like one of my, he's my favorite, if you will, business kind of consultant, book writer. Writes fantastic books. I really subscribe to his philosophies, and I've watched some of my mentors who do the same. Anyways, I'd say my leadership philosophy, in particular for a role like a CEO role, is to make sure you have what Lencioni would call a healthy organization. And so there's 2 big areas to it. I guess the first is you want to have a cohesive leadership team that functions really well together. And that looks like a team where there's no politics. You have tough conversations with each other, always respectful, with each other, and you got each other's back. You've got a great team dynamic. So, that would be really important to me, that particular for an executive team that I now lead, that we have a well-functioning team. And then the other piece is you need to have clarity around the organization and where it's going. And you need to make sure that's right from top to bottom in the organization. And those include things like the vision, the culture, strategy, goals. Everybody in the organization knows where you're going. And then you can truly act as one team. So again, I really subscribe to this. So I'd say that's core to my philosophy. The other is developing people. I love watching people grow as I get on in my career, and I'm definitely on in my career now. A lot of it is the excitement of watching younger leaders really grow and reach their potential. So those would be the two things that I'd really hold out as philosophies: team clarity and then just development of the organization and its capabilities.
I couldn't agree with you more about Lencioni's books and philosophies. And what I love about his stuff is that there's so many books that are very complex and convoluted and have all these parts and subparts to the subparts. And he just writes a book. He's got, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, or the 4 obsessions of extraordinary executive, 5 temptations of a CEO. And they're so real. They're so practical. They're so pragmatic. I use them in my role and have in the past, and just found they're just so approachable, understandable, and frankly, they just work. They really, really, they really, really work. So we're in 100% alignment on that one, Gary. This may be a part of, as you talked about, watching and coaching folks along their journeys, but what advice would you have for someone starting their career based on your career path and your philosophies? What would you encourage them to do or not do?
Yeah, again, a question we get we do get a chance every year to bring in engineering training. We call them new EITs, summer students, and they ask this question a lot. And I give the same advice to them as I give them to my own kids, is that there's 2 things to me: is you need to find something you like doing, and you need to find something that you're good at. If you get those 2 things, then, your career becomes easy. You never have to worry about looking at your watch, because you're in something you love to do. And when you're doing something you really are good at as well, you tend to exceed. So I think it's play to your strengths. For anyone starting their career, I'd absolutely say that that's the 2 most important things: is, make sure that the career you're entering into plays to your strengths, and you love it. You can't get enough of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a book we buy every new employee at the council here, and it's a one that I read years ago and just leapt out at me. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. Cal Newport is the author, and really sort of debunks the notion of pursue your dream, because he says people may pursue the dream of being a yoga instructor, but they may not know how to run a yoga business. So he says, do focus on what you're really good at, and the growth and the opportunities will come, and that will give you the freedom and flexibility to be your own boss and call your own shots and make more money and more opportunity. And typically that's where you'll find happiness, is in the successful execution of what you're really good at. And I really subscribe to that view, and it sounds like you do as well. So man, we're agreeing on everything here, Gary. This is fantastic.
One more thing there,
Yep.
Adam, just to build on what you're saying is, when I've been in these conversations sometimes, and even with my kids, some people just kind of know those things. They're kind of self-aware. They know their strengths. They know what they like. And others, it's a bit of a journey. And so I guess that would be the other piece of advice: is be a little patient. If you
Mhm.
start your career and it's not quite right, don't be scared to kind of double back and go to the thing that you really do think you'll love and that you're good at.
Okay.
Another thought.
Great advice. It's hard to be patient when you're young and trying to get opportunities, but I totally agree. Let's shift to AltaLINK. You're Alberta's largest regulated electricity transmission provider, giving 85% of Albertans power through your grid. Gary, what are some of the challenges and opportunities of having such a large scale infrastructure? I mean, you're all throughout the province. You've got to keep things going 24/7, 365. Doesn't matter what's going on. And Christmas, summer, hailstorms, snowstorms, heat waves, you name it. Maybe share with us what that's like to have all of that being in front of you on a day-to-day basis, and also from a long-term strategic perspective.
Well, there's a lot in that, Adam. So maybe what I'll start with, again, back to that organizational health, clarity around strategy and goals. Our executive team, every year we create what we call our big rocks, and what are the things that we really need to keep our eye on. And they can be, you can look at them as an opportunity, you can look at them as a risk or a challenge. The four big rocks that we have are people, our customers, energy transition, and then major events. So those are our four big rocks. So we see those as our big challenges, and people in the organization do their jobs. It's those four big rocks that are the things that we kind of focus on the most, if you will. Obviously, we got to run the day-to-day activities, but the areas we're looking for kind of big improvements on how our organization works would be those. So I'll maybe just take a minute and go through the four of them kind of quickly. So
Sure.
people, there's a lot going on with people these days. We are very committed to having a diverse workforce, making sure that, we're tapping into the best talent that's out there. So that's a big part of our people strategy. We notice the demographic shift that I think all of us see as when we look at our workforce in the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of knowledge transfer that's going to happen as our experienced leaders and experts retire. And then we're just in a new space of hybrid working environment. We do operate in a hybrid model. I'm a supporter of it, but it takes a different way of working to kind of run on a long-term basis. So there's a number of challenges on the people side. Customers, from our industry, it's reliable, affordable, and they want good customer service as well. But our customers are changing. The energy transition is changing, what our customers want. We are finding that our customers, being a transmission provider, there's a lot more generators that are connecting to the grid than we've ever had with all the renewables coming online. So our customer mix, as you can imagine, is changing. So stay close to your customers. Energy transition, and as you mentioned in the preamble, we went and had a conversation, in Ottawa about the energy transition. But electricity right now, it really is at the center of the energy transition in a lot of ways. There's a lot of focus put on electricity. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit, if you will, for doing decarbonization. So there's a lot of activity there with government, regulators, and there's a lot of exciting things happening on the technology side. So that's another big challenge opportunity for us. And then last but not least is major events. So wildfires and cyber attacks. Those are things that are front and center for us as an organization. There's a lot of activity that we're doing to kind of make sure that we're ready and that we're not falling prone, if you will, to wildfire and cyber attacks. Those would be the big challenges and opportunities, Adam.
Yeah, lots there from people to technology and energy transition and major events, which are, you kind of have a seasonality effect, but pretty much virtually impossible to predict. So you've got to be ready at a moment's notice kind of thing. So it must be an incredibly complex business to run any given day.
Well, we have it is complex. Electricity by definition has a lot of complexity, but the lucky part is I've got a great team here. So a lot of really smart people. I'm super proud of maybe at the beginning I should have said this, but the team performs extremely well when we look at reliability. We were just awarded, Electricity Canada awarded us Reliability and Resilience Award in 2023, which is fantastic. Super proud of the team for that. There's been a lot of talk rates in electricity. I know my wife gives me heck about electricity rates as well. But AltaLINK, we've done a fantastic job. We made a commitment back in 2018 to keep our rates below 2018 levels. So for the last 5 years, our rates have been, we call it flat for 5. So very proud of that as well. And then on the safety side, the team does all this complicated work in such a fantastic way. So they do it very, very safely. And we've won Electricity Canada's Safety Award, the President's Award for Safety, 7 years in a row, actually. Great team underneath me, so I thought I'd just mention that.
Well, kudos to the team for sure, Gary. That's awesome. You mentioned decarbonization as one of the complexities of the business. So where is your thinking at in terms of, as the world looks to decarbonize, what are you thinking about as AltaLINK's senior executive? We look to electrify more things, everything from home heating to transportation, more diversity of generation across renewables and geothermals and still the traditional hydrocarbon, natural gas base loads, but increasing portfolio. How do you begin to think about that and plan for that as the landscape shifts?
Another huge question, Adam. So, let me start with, that you can take that one in a lot of different directions across a lot of different sectors, but I'll start with just electricity. And, I guess right off the top, like, we certainly support decarbonization, as I think most Albertans do. It is the right thing to do. One of our big concerns as we reflect on decarbonizing the electricity sector is there isn't a technology that is perfect to replace coal and natural gas. That technology doesn't exist yet. And I'm talking about a technology that is commercially viable. And so one of the frames that, and you heard this as we did our journey out to meet with the federal government. I guess the punchline of it is there is no magic answer, but there is a lot of things that can be done right now that are viable and we consider to be no regret. So, Adam, we really are pitching for 5 things for a province like Alberta when it comes to decarbonizing electricity, and we think they're great moves, and we won't regret doing any of them. So I'll just quickly run through them. So renewables, renewables are commercially viable. So they're a technology that works today. The problem is they're not the only technology we need because of their intermittency. So, when off the top there, I said we don't have a technology that actually will completely decarbonize electricity. We do have renewables that do part of the job, and they are economic. So in our minds, we should just continue to pursue those aggressively. We've come a long ways in Alberta. Right now, we're probably in the low 20% of our energy is with renewables. And we believe you could go to 40% very economically. Going past that, it creates challenges just given their intermittency, but 40% is very doable. So in our minds, let's just move forward with them. Next is interties. We have interties with other provinces, BC and Saskatchewan, and then the state south of us, Montana. And the unfortunate part is we are running those interties at probably around a third to half of what they're capable of. And it would really help us on our decarbonization journey, keeping things reliable and affordable. But, unfortunately, we're not taking the opportunity to debottleneck those things. So that would be the second no regret. We have transitioned from coal. Those coal plants I started my career with don't exist anymore. We've moved to gas, but our belief is we're going to need unabated natural gas in the province for a considerable period of time. So we should, continue to pursue that. And it's the most cleaner than coal, and it's commercially viable. So, we believe we need to keep unabated natural gas going on in the province. And then there's 2 more, and they're one of them's on the technology side. The leading candidates in electricity that will supplement, if you will, renewables is nuclear, carbon capture and storage, and then hydrogen. The one that we probably have the most opportunity with would be carbon capture and storage. So SMRs sound like an interesting technology, but I don't think Alberta brings anything to the table with SMRs other than that we can utilize the technology. Whereas carbon capture and storage, we can continue to leverage our gas resources, take advantage of the geology that we have inside of the province. And so pursuing CCS, and this is a bit of a bet, but I don't think we'll ever regret trying to pilot and make CCUS a very commercially viable way to decarbonize. Essentially make gas non-emitting one day. So that would be our 4th pillar. And then 5th would be all of this, unfortunately for Alberta, is there's a lot of cost to it. If we look at our neighbor to the west of us, BC, largely hydro-based, they're largely decarbonized today. Whereas in Alberta, there's quite a price tag that we're going to have to pay for this. So we think exports are a real opportunity for us. If we can find the right ingredients to export and sell to, probably to the US or BC, Saskatchewan potentially as well, we can use that as a way to actually bring down our cost structure. So, as we think about decarbonization, a no regret strategy is what we would propose we do. It's such a big topic, Adam. There's so many ways to go after that. I think you can get lost in it. I think sometimes our regulations, our policies get lost in it as well. But yet in front of us, we believe there's some no regret moves that we should just get after.
Well, going back to Lencioni, there's clarity there in those 5 big moves, Gary, or no regrets moves you're talking about, and I think they make sense and largely from an all of the above strategy as opposed to trying to pick some winners and losers in that mix for sure. When you step back and look at the overall grid, Gary, what would you want Albertans to know about the current state of the grid and your infrastructure?
I'd say number one, I think our transmission grid is very well positioned. When you contrast it and compare it to other grids across, North America, we have a relatively young grid, if you will. It's not that old. You go to some other jurisdictions, they have a lot of old assets that's going to cost them a fortune to replace. So I think we're well positioned there. We have the ability to integrate, renewables. We've done that quite a bit already with pretty modest costs. We could get to that 40% level. The ISO's, the Alberta Electric System Operator, who does all the planning for the grid in the province, they've put forward their estimates, which we concur with, as pretty modest price tag to actually expand the grid to allow for that 40% renewables that I mentioned as part of those no regret strategies. So I'd say all in all, our grid is in pretty good shape. Where it's probably the weakest, and it's again one of those no regret strategy ideas, is the interties. We run more like an island than any other province or state for that matter, probably with the exception of Hawaii, maybe Alaska. We run like an island, and unfortunately, I think it's to our detriment to not have those strong interconnections. And I look at what we do on gas and oil, where we have very strong interconnections, lots of exports. The unfortunate part is with electricity, we are very closed off. So, with some very small dollars, can debottleneck right out of the gate, which is probably the biggest opportunity and maybe the biggest issue that I currently have with the grid in Alberta today.
Gary, as you look forward over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we've had some record population growth the past year, likely to continue with some strong population growth, increasing electrification. What's your investment strategy for the future? Obviously, the generation side, those producers will be making their own bets, but from a wireline and your infrastructure standpoint, are there upgrades and new locations and new lines and things like that? Where does AltaLINK see the next few years?
For the next few years, well, let me start with what we're seeing as far as load growth. In the near term, we've been seeing fairly low load growth, like probably in the 1% to 2% range, which is, I'd say, pretty typical for most, if you will, developed countries. Where the world's seeing the biggest load growth is in developing countries still. Even with population growth, it hasn't had that significant of an impact on electrical demand. There will be some, but not that significant. And the electrification, hasn't ramped up yet. And it's hard to predict, Adam, like the forecasting for electricity, it's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of unknowns where where our electrical load's going to go. I think people believe it could double or triple in size. And I think that's maybe what you're alluding to. My personal hope would be that we get a chance to decarbonize our grid. We get a chance to really explore these new technologies before electrification really kicks in full scale. So that would be my hope, because I think it's important to keep the grid affordable and reliable as we move forward. So, I guess back to your question is, what do I see in the next, number of years? Pretty modest expansion. And I think that's important to keep the grid affordable as we move forward. Now, down the road, we'll see what happens with decarbonization of all industries. I think as other industries really kick in, that's where the opportunity will exist. But like I said, I do hope that we get a chance to prove out the technologies we're going to need, technologies like CCUS, before we get into that real boom growth, which I do think will come. But again, I hope it's a ways out.
And that the technologies are proven, as you say, yeah.
And commercially viable. Sorry, Adam.
Commercially viable. No, yeah, totally essential. One thing we've looked a lot at over the past year is regulatory approvals and permitting processes. We did a big report in 2023 called Future Unbuilt. You've got 13,000 kilometers of transmission line, 300 substations. You've got an electric systems operator and Alberta Utility Commission you've got to work through. How has your experience been with regulatory approvals and permitting processes in both Canada and specifically Alberta in your operation? Are we good if you compare to your peers in the other Berkshire Hathaway portfolios? Is Alberta, Canada ahead of the game, middle pack, trailing? How is our regulatory approvals processes here?
As you know, there's a lot going on with regulatory approvals on the generation side, in particular with the renewable pause and all the rest of it. But I'd say for us on the grid side, inside of the province, it can always be faster, but it's been workable. We have a good working relationship between the ISO and the Alberta Utility Commission. The Alberta Utility Commission, I know their chair has red tape reduction kind of mantra. She's really trying hard to make things as efficient as expedient as possible. So I'd say our experiences have been pretty good so far. We did just get a line permitted in central east Alberta, and it went pretty well. So not bad for inside of the province. I think to your report, it gets a lot trickier when you do, interprovincial, regulatory applications. And we haven't done those for a long time now. And I guess back to our no regret strategy, my hope would be that we can start with debottlenecking our current interties where, there's some low hanging fruit again, just waiting for us, which I think will be a lot easier from a regulatory perspective. It'll be longer term that I do think, there will be an intertie or two in Alberta's future. And that's when we'll really test our federal approaches. So overall, I'm staying pretty good inside of Alberta for what we need to do. Now, just the one caution is there's a lot of change happening right now between the government and the AUC and the ISO around the electricity market framework. So there's policies being rewritten. The market's going to get, redesigned to a certain extent. So, we'll see what that looks like when we come out of that process, which will probably take us the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, well, we stay on our toes on that one. Make sure we don't create more challenges than necessary. Gary, as we wrap here, two final questions. The first is, as I mentioned off the top, you were part of our One Alberta, One Canada mission to Ottawa last October. Love your thoughts on that mission. What you felt the experience was like, what you learned and took away from it.
So first off, Adam, I'll give you a lot of kudos. Those are tough delegations to lead, and you did a great job.
Fun, but lots of work for sure.
Yeah. So anyways, for those that maybe didn't follow it, putting together a big delegation, which we had across multiple industries, and then lining up, great meetings. And I don't know how Adam did it, but he managed to get, all of the key ministers, even an opportunity to be at an event with the Prime Minister while we were there. So did a great job of getting us access to all the key areas, which was fantastic. Adam, as I participated in the energy stream.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my observations is we all are agreeing on, where we want to go to the end state, where we all are, maybe, on different trajectories or have different perspectives. Is just how we get there, the timing of it, and exactly how we do things. I really like the tagline, I think, that you framed coming out of it, which is, we need to recognize that every jurisdiction is unique and that, a one size solution doesn't fit all. And I think that is the right answer for Canada. That is the right answer for us. And, I was proud to be a part of a delegation that delivered that message that, we are going to need to treat different jurisdictions differently. I'll maybe just give you a couple learnings that I took away from it. It was great to get an opportunity, and we've done it a couple times with other associations, but Adam, I'd say the one we did was kind of special. The One Alberta delegation, it was great just hear your peers. When we sit down in a room talking with a minister, and you can imagine all the representatives get to say their thing. It's great to kind of hear what your peers have to say, and I found the conversations very candid. And when you're part of a delegation like that, I do think we do our best to unify on messages, which is really important for the government. I do feel bad for them at times when you have dozens and dozens of constituents coming in, all with different perspectives and all spinning things a different way. It's kind of nice to come as a unified voice. So anyways, I like the idea of doing more of these in the future, Adam. So again, yeah, I thought it was a great delegation, and great success.
Right. Well, thank you, Gary. And yes, there will be more in the future. So stay tuned. And as we wrap, Gary, what's your long-term view for Alberta? Are you excited, concerned? Are we headed on the right path? And what do we need to do to stay there?
Yeah, for Alberta, I'm super optimistic. There's two facets of Alberta for me. There's how good of a place is Alberta to live, and then what's the opportunity for careers. And when I look at Alberta, my wife and I have been doing quite a bit of traveling recently, and you get on these planes, you're in the airports, and you're doing connections, and you run into people that are they're flying to our province, and I'm flying to theirs, and I'm like, why don't I just spend more time here? I'm trying to convince my wife we can do a lot more of these day vacations, because Alberta is so beautiful. I've never been anywhere that I think actually is better than Alberta. We have a lot going for us in this province, and there's so much to see and do. And then on the career side, I'm very optimistic. I do hear people that are, have concerns about the energy transition, the impact that it's going to have on Alberta, and I don't have a crystal ball as to how it's all going to look in the end here, I guess. But I do think energy, oil and gas will be around for a very, very long time. I don't see any way out of it, and a lot of what we've been through over the last couple of years, I think, has shown us that the oil and gas industry is going to be strong for a long time. And I'll maybe just bring it back as a final comment on a personal note. My daughter, who's a teacher, and my new son-in-law, who's a lawyer, they moved to Toronto to start their career. And, I was very pleased about a year ago that they phoned up and said, we're coming back to Alberta because we think Alberta's a better place. So if my family's any representation of it, I love the fact that they've kind of come home, and they're planning to they end up buying a house, and a lot more affordable, and they've got great jobs here in Alberta. So I think the future's great.
Well, great place to end, and no better testament to Alberta than Albertans moving back to Alberta after realizing that there is no greener grass than there is here. Best place to be. So, Gary, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, and joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. And thanks for the invite, Adam. That was fantastic.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of C-Suite Unplugged, an Alberta Better podcast series. This podcast is a production of the Business Council of Alberta. You can learn more about us at businesscouncilab.com. We'd love to connect with you on social media, so give us a follow at BizCouncilAB, that's B-I-Z, Council AB, on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you like this episode and want to support our message of shared prosperity for all, please be sure to head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts to subscribe, rate the show, and give us a quick review. New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.